Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama's planning a day of meetings today at the White House related to the fallout from Ferguson. He'll first meet with his cabinet to discuss the results of a review of federal programs that provide military-style equipment to state and local enforcement agencies. Obama's also invited younger civil rights leaders for a meeting today to discuss what one official described as, quote, the broader challenges we still face as a nation, including the mistrust between law enforcement and communities of color. Also today, Attorney General Eric Holder's heading to Atlanta to speak at the Ebenezer Baptist Church where Martin Luther King Jr. once preached. Holder's visit is part of the White House strategy to strengthen relationships between police and the communities they serve. We go now to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Michael Eric Dyson, University Professor of Sociology at Georgetown University. His piece for the New York Times this weekend was titled, Where Do We Go After Ferguson? He's author of a forthcoming book on President Obama and race. Professor Michael Eric Dyson, welcome back to Democracy Now! What was your response to the verdict? I call it a verdict. It's actually a grand jury decision last week, but it seemed like a verdict. It seems that you had a grand jury that actually conducted a trial for one side of the case. The other side, Mike Brown, dead.
Absolutely. And we decry when cases of flagrant violation occur in other countries. We are upset when we think due process is not acknowledged. We are outraged when we think that people don't have access to evidence and able to defend themselves, or at least people who are concerned about the case defend a particular point of view. We had a full-on trial, except we didn't have anybody defending Mike Brown or his memory or his point of view. We had no testimony that was put forth by a defense lawyer that might have repudiated several of the things that Officer Wilson said. And then we had a prosecutor who was acting as a defense attorney for Officer Wilson. And there's a sad, tragic predictability about what happened because Robert McCulloch, the prosecutor, has never brought a case against a police person who has been accused of killing a black person there in the area. So when you put all that stuff together, it was a toxic brew. It was predictably something that would end in an unsatisfying verdict because it was a trial. And I think this underscores the inability of people of color to get our viewpoints across. It is not simply a matter of mistrust or distrust. You know, when somebody's abusing a child, you don't say, let's develop trust between a parent and a child. You remove the abusive parent, give them some parenting skills and lessons, or at the very least prevent them from imposing further abuse on that child. So I think that the very metaphor that regulates and governs the kinds of meetings between the White House, which are critical and necessary, and police departments and citizens surely must involve developing trust, but trust only after the abuse has been removed.
You mentioned the word child, Michael, and that's exactly how Darren Wilson described how he felt. He felt like a 5-year-old child dealing with, I think he put it, Hulk Hogan. Can you talk about the trove of papers that McCulloch released and that description that Darren Wilson gave of dealing with Mike Brown?
Yes, that's an excellent point to underscore. Mike Brown was 6'4", and 292 pounds. Officer Wilson is 6'4", 210 pounds. So you are hardly a child against a Hulk Hogan. Look at what's being reinforced here. The brawny, blustering, as Ann Petrie put it, you know, behemoth, this big black man, 18 years old, this big black man who was rising up in the collective imagination of America and in Officer Wilson's sight as some kind of demonic force. He literally used the word demon. It was a demon. It looked like a demon coming at me. He's reduced him to a thing. He's made him an animal or less. He's made him a figment of not only his imagination, but the collective imagination of America that has been fearful of the black male threat. When you put all that stuff together, from pop culture, from deep religious and scientific treatises in the early part of the 20th century that were completely and thoroughly racist, then you you've got a tremendously difficult problem on your hand. And that is to say, how do black people protect themselves, not against simply the bullets of a police officer, but the metaphors, the stereotypes, the tropes that operate in that police officer's imagination that are equally lethal because they lead to trigger happy cops, or at least hair trigger decisions where cops end up believing that they must use lethal force to contain a threat that's not even real, or if there is a real threat, resort to the most lethal form of resolution of the conflict, as opposed to trying other things like driving away, like using mace, like tasing, like calling for help and the like. So when we think about all of this, this is the dehumanization of African American people. This is the failure to recognize our fundamental rights to exist in the state. And this is using state authority to legally execute black people on the streets of America.
Professor Dyson, I wanted to go to that exclusive interview with ABC News' George Stephanopoulos last week that Officer Darren Wilson gave, breaking his silence about the shooting of Mike Brown.
Is there anything you could have done differently that would have prevented that killing from taking place?
No.
Nothing?
No.
And you're absolutely convinced, when you look through your heart and your mind, that if Michael Brown were white, this would have gone down in exactly the same way?
Yes.
No question.
No question.
Stephanopoulos also asked Darren Wilson whether the killing of Michael Brown would always haunt him.
I don't think it's a haunting. It's always going to be something that happened.
You have a very clean conscience.
The reason I have a clean conscience is because I know I did my job right.
Professor Michael Eric Dyson, your response.
Well, this is disturbing. First of all, even people, men of war, women of war, who feel that they are executing their duly sworn responsibilities have a sense of shame or guilt, or at least some kind of disturbing emotion that makes them regretful of having to do what they think they have to do. This man has a clear conscience because he is conscienceless when it comes to executing his responsibilities in the face of, black humanity, denying black humanity, refusing to acknowledge that there were alternatives available to him, and then feeling a kind of dispassion, a kind of clinical distance from the event, as if it was somebody else doing it. And the reason he is not bothered by it, because I think that this man has been reared in a culture that has taught him the lack of respect for black lives. That's why the Black Lives Matter is important. And let's not forget, 30 for 30, the ESPN documentary series, did one of their documentaries on, I think it was a football team from Ferguson, and one of the young men who was on that team was driving in a car. His parents were driving behind him. On the way home, the young man was pulled over by a cop. Since the father was in the car behind him, he gets out of the car. He goes to the car to discover what's going on, and they say this policeman treated them with profound disrespect, was extremely aggressive, hostile, and nasty, was attempting, I think, to arrest the father, but ultimately did not do so. Who was it? Officer Darren Wilson. So we know that this man is used to being 6'4", bigger than most of his, quote, competition, most of the people that he deals with. And when he met his match, so to speak, physically, let's be real. What may have happened there is the same thing that might have happened with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman, is that a white person, in this case even worse, because he is a duly sworn officer of the state, attempting to menace and intimidate an African-American youth, and may have gotten more than he bargained for, or bitten off more than he could chew, and as a result of that, withdraws his gun from its holster or wherever it was planted, and then shot this boy mercilessly. And then even on the streets, despite what he testified to, there are so many other witnesses that suggest that Mike Brown's hands were up. He's asking his friend, why, who heard him, he's asking the policeman, why are you shooting me, and I don't have a weapon? So the reality is that when we piece together the evidence, Darren Wilson has an extremely dangerous mindset. His resignation came too late to save Mike Brown's life, but other policemen should be checked for similar kinds of aggression that become racialized when their targets are African-American people.
What needs to happen now, Professor Dyson, and what do you think of what President Obama is doing today at the White House, having this kind of summit with young civil rights leaders, talking about the issue of the militarizing of the police, as well as how communities of color can get along with law enforcement?
Well, that's all very necessary. I applaud the president for that. But again, when I made the analogy earlier about abuse and the communities that have been abused, let's not pretend that this is an equivalence. You know, there are no instances, there are not instances that we have been outraged about by attempts of broad communities to target police people and to constantly murder them, assault them, and the like. There are tremendous tensions that need to be discussed. Of course, the policing of communities is necessary given the extraordinary, difficulties in some communities and the crime in other communities. There's no doubting that. But to simply say, let's develop trust, the trust rests upon what? Resolution of conflict, of negotiating differences, and informing the police that they cannot be occupying forces in these African-American and Latino communities and in these poor areas. So it's, it's a matter of not only developing trust because we have to understand each other, we also have to tamp down on the lethal ferocity of police departments that have been over-militarized, under-trained when it comes to dealing with people of color, refusing to acknowledge their humanity, and that thin blue line that ostensibly separates police people from so-called civilian society has often been blurred, and the erratic and I think often dangerous practices of rogue cops or cops who don't have enough sensitivity about the humanity of people of color and others needs to be raised. So it's a good first step. But I think just like the Kerner Commission was convened by President Lyndon Johnson while the flames of Detroit, my home city, were yet burning, while there are embers of simmering tension in Ferguson yet, I think the president should impanel a commission to talk about police brutality in America and to understand its vicious consequences and what we can do to resolve it.
You really got into it with former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani on Meet the Press last week when he talked about the problem of police violence, he said, was a distraction from the real problem of black-on-black crime. It starts with Giuliani.
I find it very disappointing that you're not discussing the fact that 93% of blacks in America are killed by other blacks. We're talking about the exception here.
Well, look, first of all, go ahead, Michael. No, this is about a trust issue.
We are talking about the significant exception. 93% of blacks are killed by other blacks.
Let me respond to that.
I would like to see the attention. I'd like to see the attention paid to that you are paying to this, and the solutions to that.
He's taking up time. Can I say this? First of all, most black people who commit crimes against other black people go to jail. Number two, they are not sworn by the police department as a agent of the state to uphold the law. So in both cases, that's a false equivalency that the mayor has drawn.
Giuliani appeared later on Fox News and defended his argument. This is a part of what he said.
The danger to a black child in America is not a white police officer. That's going to happen less than 1% of the time. The danger to a black child, if it was my child, the danger is another black. 93% of the times, they're going to be killed by another black. And the idea that whites do not go to jail for killing blacks, first of all, only about 3% of whites kill blacks. They go to jail in approximately the same percentage as blacks go to jail. The conviction rate is almost exactly the same. The difference is it's a very rare exception when a white kills a black.
That's former Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Your response, Michael Eric Dyson.
Well, first of all, as Disraeli said, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics, and we end up having statistical myopia. What I didn't get a chance to say because I've got a host there, understandably, who's concerned about keeping the peace on the panel, so I'm being waved down by the host and hollered at, so to speak, by my opponent, and you don't get a chance under those conditions, unlike right here, to say what you have to say. One of the things that is necessary to say is that 84% of white people who are killed are murdered by other white people. Why aren't we outraged by white-on-white crime? Why aren't we talking about the vicious and insidious decline of moral stature in white America? Why aren't we talking about pathologies of white culture that lead to meth labs being generated on campuses, or the decline in moral imagination as exhibited in pop stars who are decried from pulpits across America in white culture? So we could develop a kind of, tablet of demonology against white America, which would be ridiculous because the problem is deeper and more profound than that. Intra-racial violence from, in groups is endemic in America. So people kill where they live. They commit crime where they live. if you want integrated killing, you have to have integrated communities. Now, tongue-in-cheek there. The irony is that is the fact that Mr. Giuliani is unconscious of that, will not speak directly to that, because it would throw him off the scent of the trail of demonizing African-American people. Now, black people themselves are quite concerned about death in their own communities, in our own communities. Just yesterday here in D.C., a woman was on television, a black woman, asking for help in solving the murder of her son. And they had a videotape of, or a recording of a man going into a building and then rushing out, who is thought to be the murderer of her son. And I think it's an African-American man. And there's no like, oh no, let's exempt him from moral critique because he's a black person. We are as outraged as anybody else by so-called black-on-black crime. We are enraged when black people kill black people. But let's not divorce the killing of black people by black people from broader cultural imaginations that have demonized black people. Black people watch a lot of television and consume a lot of pop culture, and the suspicion and skepticism of black identity pervades black culture as well.
Michael Eric
so
Dyson,
in one sense,
we just have
yes.
we have less than a minute on the satellite, and you raise in your column the issue of Bill Cosby, and I was wondering if you could just end on your concern about what has come out about him, the raping and mugging of a series of women over 40 years.
It's evil. It's horrible. It should be talked about. It should be dealt with. When I was demonized, when I dealt with it 10 years ago in my book, many black people waved me down and sent me away saying that you're wrong by attacking a great figure like this. But what's hurtful to me is that while he's been accused of this raping and mugging, which is absolutely untoward and evil, at the same time, African-American women were demonized by him in his own language before, and they were not protected. So both and, not either or.
Well, Michael Eric Dyson, I want to thank you very much for being with us, University Professor of Sociology at Georgetown University. We'll link to your piece in the New York Times, Where Do We Go After Ferguson?